Malware, short for malicious software, is any software used to disrupt computer operations, gather sensitive information, gain access to private computer systems, or display unwanted advertising. Malware is defined by its malicious intent, acting against the requirements of the computer user, and does not include software that causes unintentional harm due to some deficiency. The term badware is sometimes used, and applied to both true malware and unintentionally harmful software. Malware may be stealthy, intended to steal information or spy on computer users for an extended period without their knowledge, as for example Regin. Or it may be designed to cause harm, often as sabotage, or to extort payment. Malware is an umbrella term used to refer to a variety of forms of hostile or intrusive software, including computer viruses, worms, Trojan horses, ransomware, spyware, adware, scareware, and other malicious programs. It can take the form of executable code, scripts, active content, and other software. Malware is often disguised as, or embedded in, non-malicious files. As of 2011 update, the majority of active malware threats were worms or Trojans rather than viruses. In law, malware is sometimes known as a computer contaminant, as in the legal codes of several U.S. states. Spyware or other malware is sometimes found embedded in programs supplied officially by companies, e.g., downloadable from websites that appear useful or attractive, but may have, for example, additional hidden tracking functionality that gathers marketing statistics. An example of such software, which was described as illegitimate, is the Sony Rootkit, a Trojan embedded into CDs sold by Sony, which silently installed and concealed itself on purchasers' computers with the intention of preventing illicit copying. It also reported on users' listening habits, and unintentionally created vulnerabilities that were exploited by unrelated malware. Software such as antivirus, anti-malware, and firewalls are used to protect against activity identified as malicious, and to recover from attacks purposes. Many early infectious programs, including the first Internet worm, were written as experiments or pranks. Today, malware is used by both black hat hackers and governments to steal personal, financial, or business information. Malware is sometimes used broadly against government or corporate websites to gather guarded information, or to disrupt their operation in general. However, malware is often used against individuals to gain information, such as personal identification numbers or details, bank or credit card numbers, and passwords. Left unguarded, personal and network computers can be at considerable risk against these threats. Since the rise of widespread broadband internet access, malicious software has more frequently been designed for profit. Since 2003, the majority of widespread viruses and worms have been designed to take control of users' computers for illicit purposes. Infected, zombie computers are used to send email spam, to host contraband data such as child pornography, or to engage in distributed denial-of-service attacks as a form of extortion. Programs designed to monitor users' web browsing, display unsolicited advertisements, or redirect affiliate marketing revenues are called spyware. Spyware programs do not spread like viruses, instead they are generally installed by exploiting security holes. They can also be packaged together with user-installed software, such as peer-to-peer applications. Ransomware affects an infected computer in some way, and demands payment to reverse the damage. For example, programs such as CryptoLocker encrypt files securely, and only decrypt them on payment of a substantial sum of money. Some malware is used to generate money by click fraud, making it appear that the computer user has clicked an advertising link on a site, generating a payment from the advertiser. It was estimated in 2012 that about 60 to 70% of all active malware used some kind of click fraud, and 22% of all ad clicks were fraudulent. Malware is usually used for criminal purposes, but can be used for sabotage, often without direct benefit to the perpetrators. One example of sabotage was Stuxnet, used to destroy very specific industrial equipment. There have been politically motivated attacks that have spread over and shut down large computer networks, including massive deletion of files and corruption of master boot records, described as computer killing. Such attacks were made on Sony Pictures Entertainment and Saudi Aramco. Proliferation. Preliminary results from Symantec published in 2008 suggested that the release rate of malicious code and other unwanted programs may be exceeding that of legitimate software applications, according to F-Secure. As much malware was produced in 2007 as in the previous 20 years altogether. Malware's most common pathway from criminals to users is through the Internet, primarily by email and the World Wide Web. The prevalence of malware as a vehicle for Internet crime, along with the challenge of anti-malware software to keep up with the continuous stream of new malware, has seen the adoption of a new mindset for individuals and businesses using the Internet. With the amount of malware currently being distributed, some percentage of computers are currently assumed to be infected. For businesses, especially those that sell mainly over the Internet, this means they need to find a way to operate despite security concerns. The result is a greater emphasis on back-office protection designed to protect against advanced malware operating on customers' computers. A 2013 Webroot study shows that 64% of companies allow remote access to servers for 25% to 100% of their workforce, and that companies with more than 25% of their employees accessing servers remotely have higher rates of malware threats. On 29 March 2010, Symantec Corporation named Shaoxing, China, as the world's malware capital. A 2011 study from the University of California, Berkeley, and the Madrid Institute for Advanced Studies published an article in Software Development Technologies, examining how entrepreneurial hackers are helping enable the spread of malware by offering access to computers for a price. Microsoft reported in May 2011 that 1 in every 14 downloads from the Internet may now contain malware code. Social media, and Facebook in particular, are seeing a rise in the number of tactics used to spread malware to computers. A 2014 study found that malware is being increasingly aimed at mobile devices such as smartphones as they increase in popularity. Infectious malware, viruses and worms. The best-known types of malware, viruses and worms, are known for the manner in which they spread, rather than any specific types of behavior. The term computer virus is used for a program that embeds itself in some other executable software on the target system without the user's consent, and when that is run causes the virus to spread to other executables. On the other hand, a worm is a standalone malware program that actively transmits itself over a network to infect other computers. These definitions lead to the observation that a virus requires the user to run an infected program or operating system for the virus to spread, whereas a worm spreads itself. Concealment. Viruses, Trojan horses, rootkits, backdoors and evasion. These categories are not mutually exclusive, so malware may use multiple techniques. This section only applies to malware designed to operate undetected, not sabotage and ransomware. Virus is a computer program usually hidden within another seemingly innocuous program that produces copies of itself and inserts them into other programs or files, and that usually performs a malicious action. Trojan horses. For a malicious program to accomplish its goals, it must be able to run without being detected, shut down, or deleted. When a malicious program is disguised as something normal or desirable, users may unwittingly install it. This is the technique of the Trojan horse or Trojan. In broad terms, a Trojan horse is any program that invites the user to run it, concealing harmful or malicious executable code of any description. The code may take effect immediately and can lead to many undesirable effects, such as encrypting the user's files or downloading and implementing further malicious functionality. In the case of some spyware, adware, etc., the supplier may require the user to acknowledge or accept its installation, describing its behavior in loose terms that may easily be misunderstood or ignored, with the intention of deceiving the user into installing it without the supplier technically in breach of the law. Rootkits. Once a malicious program is installed on a system, it is essential that it stays concealed to avoid detection. Software packages known as rootkits allow this concealment by modifying the host's operating system so that the malware is hidden from the user. Rootkits can prevent a malicious process from being visible in the system's list of processes, or keep its files from being read. Some malicious programs contain routines to defend against removal, not merely to hide themselves. An early example of this behavior is recorded in the jargon file tale of a pair of programs infesting a Xerox CPEV time-sharing system. Each ghost job would detect the fact that the other had been killed, and would start a new copy of the recently stopped program within a few milliseconds. The only way to kill both ghosts was to kill them simultaneously or to deliberately crash the system. Backdoors. A backdoor is a method of bypassing normal authentication procedures, usually over a connection to a network such as the Internet. Once a system has been compromised, one or more backdoors may be installed in order to allow access in the future, invisibly to the user. The idea has often been suggested that computer manufacturers pre-install backdoors on their systems to provide technical support for customers, but this has never been reliably verified. It was reported in 2014 that U.S. government agencies had been diverting computers purchased by those considered targets to secret workshops where software or hardware permitting remote access by the agency was installed. Considered to be among the most productive operations to obtain access to networks around the world, backdoors may be installed by Trojan horses, worms, implants, or other methods. The most common evasion technique is when the malware evades analysis and detection by fingerprinting the environment when executed. The second most common evasion technique is confusing automated tools detection methods. This allows malware to avoid detection by technologies such as signature-based antivirus software by changing the server used by the malware. The third most common evasion technique is timing-based evasion. This is when malware runs at certain times or following certain actions taken by the user, so it executes during certain vulnerable periods, such as during the boot process while remaining dormant the rest of the time. The fourth most common evasion technique is done by obfuscating internal data so that automated tools do not detect the malware. A new wrinkle is adware that disables anti-malware and virus protection. Technical remedies are available. Vulnerability to malware. In this context, and throughout, what is called the system under attack may be anything from a single application, through a complete computer or an operating system, to a large network. Various factors make a system more vulnerable to malware. Security defects in software. Malware exploits security defects in the design of the operating system, in applications, or in vulnerable versions of browser plugins such as Adobe Flash Player, Adobe Acrobat or Reader, or Java. Sometimes even installing new versions of such plugins does not automatically uninstall old versions. Security advisories from plugin providers announce security-related updates. Common vulnerabilities are assigned CVE IDs and listed in the U.S. National Vulnerability Database. SecuniusI is an example of software, free for personal use, that will check a PC for vulnerable out-of-date software, and attempt to update it. Malware authors target bugs, or loopholes, to exploit. A common method is exploitation of a buffer overrun vulnerability, where software designed to store data in a specified region of memory does not prevent more data than the buffer can accommodate being supplied. Malware may provide data that overflows the buffer, with malicious executable code or data after the end. When this payload is accessed, it does what the attacker, not the legitimate software, determines. In secure design or user error, early PCs had to be booted from floppy disks. When built-in hard drives became common, the operating system was normally started from them. But it was possible to boot from another boot device if available, such as a floppy disk, CD-ROM, DVD-ROM, USB flash drive or network. It was common to configure the computer to boot from one of these devices when available. Normally none would be available. The user would intentionally insert, say, a CD into the optical drive to boot the computer in some special way. For example, to install an operating system. Even without booting, computers can be configured to execute software on some media as soon as they become available, e.g., to auto-run a CD or USB device when inserted. Malicious software distributors would trick the user into booting or running from an infected device or medium. For example, a virus could make an infected computer add auto-runnable code to any USB stick plugged into it. Anyone who then attached the stick to another computer set to auto-run from USB would in turn become infected, and also pass on the infection in the same way. More generally, any device that plugs into a USB port, including gadgets like lights, fans, speakers, toys, even a digital microscope, can be used to spread malware. Devices can be infected during manufacturing or supply if quality control is inadequate. This form of infection can largely be avoided by setting up computers by default to boot from the internal hard drive, if available, and not to auto-run from devices. Intentional booting from another device is always possible by pressing certain keys during boot. Older email software would automatically open HTML email containing potentially malicious JavaScript code. Users may also execute disguised malicious email attachments and infected executable files supplied in other ways. Overprivileged users and overprivileged code in computing. Privilege refers to how much a user or program is allowed to modify a system. In poorly designed computer systems, both users and programs can be assigned more privileges than they should be, and malware can take advantage of this. The two ways that malware does this is through overprivileged users and overprivileged code. Some systems allow all users to modify their internal structures, and such users today would be considered overprivileged users. This was the standard operating procedure for early microcomputer and home computer systems, where there was no distinction between an administrator or root and a regular user of the system. In some systems, non-administrator users are overprivileged by design, in the sense that they are allowed to modify internal structures of the system. In some environments, users are overprivileged because they have been inappropriately granted administrator or equivalent status. Some systems allow code executed by a user to access all rights of that user, which is known as overprivileged code. This was also standard operating procedure for early microcomputer and home computer systems. Malware, running as overprivileged code, can use this privilege to subvert the system. Almost all currently popular operating systems, and also many scripting applications, allow code too many privileges. Usually in the sense that when a user executes code, the system allows that code all rights of that user. This makes users vulnerable to malware in the form of email attachments, which may or may not be disguised. Use of the same operating system homogeneity, e.g., when all computers in a network run the same operating system, upon exploiting one worm can exploit them all. For example, Microsoft Windows or Mac OS X have such a large share of the market that concentrating on either could enable an exploited vulnerability to subvert a large number of systems. Instead, introducing diversity, purely for the sake of robustness, could increase short-term costs for training and maintenance. However, having a few diverse nodes could deter total shutdown of the network as long as all the nodes are not part of the same directory service for authentication, and allow those nodes to help with recovery of the infected nodes. Such separate, functional redundancy could avoid the cost of a total shutdown, at the cost of increased complexity and reduced usability in terms of single sign-on authentication.